How do I choose which firms to apply to for internships? Is applying to more firms or fewer firms better? What can I do if my grades or my experience aren't the best?
While there are probably dozens of things we could talk about, today we want to mention a couple of things that we learned through our experience and from our own mistakes that we think are really important for law students to know and what we wish we knew when we were applying for jobs as law students.
Hey guys, welcome to our channel. It's Em
and Lloyd, and today we want to share some of the career tips that we wish we got when we were still law school students looking for jobs. As some of you may already know, I'm a corporate transactions lawyer in Hong Kong. I've been a junior associate at my firm for about 1.5 years, and I've been at my firm for a total of about 3.5 years. Emily was a disputes lawyer in Hong Kong for about 6 years and was a mid-level associate at her previous firm. If you haven't seen it yet, Emily recently made a video on her journey from being a law student to ultimately deciding to leave the legal industry, and we'll leave a link to that video up above.
However, the journey from being law students to becoming practicing lawyers was definitely not smooth for either of us, and there were also some things we didn't realize or learn until we had started working already. On reflection, it would have been really helpful if we had known how to deal with some of these things or what to focus on as students, so we want to share these things with you in our video today.
In pretty much any industry, it's a challenge to transition from being a student to finding a job. And this is no different in law. Speaking from experience, one of the trickiest parts of career progression as a junior lawyer is trying to find that first job right after law school.
But there's so many things to think about before you even get the job, like how do I choose which firms to apply to for internships? Is applying to more firms or fewer firms better? What can I do if my grades or my experience aren't the best?
While there are probably dozens of things we could talk about, today we want to mention a couple of things that we learned through our experience and from our own mistakes that we think are really important for law students to know and what we wish we knew when we were applying for jobs as law students.
First off, we're going to cover the approach towards applying for internships, also called vacation schemes under the Hong Kong and UK systems. However, we think that the things we're going to cover also apply to applications for training contracts at law firms, as well as to other job applications in other industries more broadly.
That being said, we also acknowledge that as law students, you're not necessarily in a position to be really choosy about what offers you accept. It's a highly competitive industry like many others, and the primary concern is really just to get as much experience as possible and to find as many opportunities as you can to try to eventually find a job.
To start off, the first piece of advice we wish we would have been told would be to apply to a reasonable number of law firms, and by that we mean not too many or too few. These should be firms that you think may be a good fit, either in terms of the practice areas that you're interested in or for other important reasons, such as the firm's reputation for their culture or pro bono work.
Now, to elaborate on this, we're not saying that you should apply for every opportunity out there, as there is a balance between the number of applications that it's reasonable to do in any given length of time without sacrificing the quality of those applications. For example, it's simply not possible to apply for, say, 50 jobs, with high quality job applications being sent for each position, and similarly, it's not advisable to apply for just 1 or 2 jobs, even if those applications are amazing, as there are always factors that are going to be outside of your control. So this was a mistake that I made myself. When I was applying for jobs out of law school, I initially applied for only one firm. I had gone to career talks at the firm, the practice areas made total sense to me, and I got along with everyone that I met from that firm. But even though I was selected for an internship and did quite well during the internship, I ultimately didn't end up getting a job there. And because I didn't have any backup options available that year, I needed to reapply for jobs again the next year.
Funnily enough, I actually had the opposite problem. When I was a student looking for jobs, I made the mistake of applying to too many firms because I thought the more firms I applied to, the higher my chances, right? I ended up applying to about 30 firms, but the problem was I didn't spend as much time as I should have on each application to make sure that they were high quality enough. As a result, I didn't get any of the internships that I originally wanted.
So instead, we think it makes sense to put in high quality applications for about 8 to 12 different law firms. Shortlisting about 8 to 12 firms makes it absolutely manageable for you to do research on each of those firms and to reflect in your application why you think you're a suitable candidate for that firm. In law, as with many other professional services industries, there are just so many employers in the market these days that it's really important to narrow down the practice area that you're interested in getting into, such as corporate and commercial, litigation and disputes, or administrative law and human rights, just to name a few.
On top of this, it's also important to try to find a firm which is a good cultural fit. So while we don't think it's a good idea to apply to too few firms, it's also important not to apply to too many, and instead to go for ones which you think might be a good cultural fit, although you never know for sure until you join.
This point about potential fit is really important. I do a lot of graduate recruitment these days, and I often find myself talking to law students and interns about how our firm has a flexible working policy when it comes to work from home, as well as a lot of cultural initiatives to try and be a more progressive law firm. These things are all super important to me as they allow me to have a relatively flexible lifestyle in a notoriously demanding profession, and we try to make sure that we let our interns experience this to see that the firm practices what it preaches in the time that they spend with us.
It's also generally very important to do thorough research into the firms that you're interested in, whether for the practice areas or for other factors like their culture and their values, particularly with a focus on how they're trying to distinguish themselves. We also found it very helpful to attend career talks, open days, or law fairs where you get the chance to speak to representatives from the firms and ask questions to get a feel for the firm's culture. You might also get the chance to hear perspectives from these representatives and get information that might not be the type that you're likely to find on the firm's website.
And on that note, while culture and fit may not seem super important to a law student trying to find your first job in a highly competitive market out of law school, we assure you that when you're expected to be at your job day after day, culture and fit do really make a difference. In a career like law, where the hours can be long and the work very demanding, it's really important to be surrounded by people that you like and doing work that you largely enjoy doing. So even if you start out at a firm that doesn't feel like it's the right fit, it's important to keep this in mind when you're thinking about switching firms or moving to a different practice area later on.
Well, we all know it's good to have straight A's and be at the top of your class and to have loads of experience related to the legal industry. What if that's not the case? By definition, the majority of us are not at the top of our classes.
Although both of us had decent grades in law school, we both also had classes where we didn't do that well. Funnily enough, my worst 2 grades in law school were in commercial law and corporate law, and yet today I'm a corporate lawyer advising on commercial matters. It kind of goes to show that grades do matter, but they're not everything, as academic performance is only one aspect of being a good lawyer.
We learned through a joint experience that while it's important to be honest with yourself about the quality of your application and to know your potential weaknesses, it's also equally important to focus on the things that you do well. Instead of being pessimistic or viewing your potential weaknesses negatively, learn to think about how these experiences, whether personal or work-related, may be beneficial to a career in law or might have taught you something meaningful and justify it as such.
These days, there are lawyers who started out in all sorts of different industries. We both know lawyers that started in completely different fields, like chemistry, architecture, and engineering, just to name a few. And even one of the greatest judges in the last few hundred years started off as a mathematician. So there's definitely plenty of room in the legal industry for people with different backgrounds and different perspectives on life.
So while it's definitely important to prepare yourself to address any shortcomings and to explain them if necessary, it's just as important to put a positive spin on your experiences, whatever they may be. You never know, it might be those experiences that set you apart from other applicants.
So when we were interviewing for jobs, we both gave very honest answers as to why we didn't perform so well in certain classes in law school. And at the same time, while we both had a good amount of law-related extracurricular activities on our resumes, such as mooting and acting as research assistants, we both learned to put a positive spin and explain our experiences outside of law and how they would help make us better lawyers.
For instance, both Loda and I worked at a bar while we were still in university. As someone who is more on the introverted side by nature, this was initially a super uncomfortable experience for me. But the experience of working as front of house floor staff actually helped me improve my communication skills quite a bit, and I also learned to think on my feet faster. I actually referred to this experience in most of my interviews when I was looking to move laterally between law firms, and it was something that interviewers generally really like to hear. Although the experience of working in a bar was something completely different, the skill set that I gained was still very relevant because law, at the end of the day, is still a service industry, just like working in food and beverage.
In order to frame your experiences in a positive light, it's not enough to just talk about what your experience was, but it's important to talk about the skills you gained during that experience, how that experience would change you as a person, and how those skills will continue to serve you in the future. We believe that any experience can be a positive one, if framed correctly, and it's really important to try to put your best foot forward and package all of your experiences in the most positive light possible when putting yourself out there and asking for a job.
So there you have it, guys. Those are some of the important things that we wish we knew when we were still law students looking for jobs.
Our tips today are not the usual tips that you might hear about how best to perform during an internship or how best to write a CV. But we believe that the points we talk about today really inform the best possible mindset and approach to job hunting, which can really set you up for success.
Thanks a lot for watching, guys. If you like this video, please hit that like button below and consider subscribing.
And if you have any thoughts on future videos you'd like to see, or if you want to discuss any of the things we talked about in this video, please let us know in the comments. If you haven't seen it yet, Emily made a video recently on her journey from being a law student to ultimately leaving the legal industry. We'll leave a link to it up below. Up below.
I need more coffee.
To ultimately deciding to leave the industry, and we'll leave a link to that video up above.
You ruined the shot.
Sorry.
Maybe you point, but I don't point.
Yeah, okay, that's true.
If you haven't seen it yet, Emily recently made...
Sorry.
If you haven't seen it yet, Emily recently made a video on her journey from being a law...
Oh no.
Oh god, okay, we're good.